Hello, welcome back to the Kidmin podcast. This is episode number 3. I'm here with Nick Blevins again. Nick, it's always good to have you here. You're the only one I've had here. This is still so new. I'm glad to have you back. I'm glad to have you help me launch this thing, especially since you have been pressuring me for the last year to launch this thing. So it's so good to have you here again, Nick.
At least a year, maybe
At least
more
a
than a
year,
year. But, and
probably.
I feel like this is like, I'm coming to the end of my time here. You're going to have much better guests and even some solo pods, going forward. So this might be my last hurrah for a while here.
That
I'll
is
be
true.
listening
So
though.
if you've gotten tired of seeing Nick's face, you can
Yeah, no
you can
worries.
stay tuned.
Yeah,
But if you miss him, you can go over to Nick Blevins' Family Ministry
there
podcast.
you go.
He's still there. So
That's right.
all this great content. No, it's so good to be back with you again. Hey, just a reminder, it is January. We are kicking off our family ministry coaching cohorts. We do this every January. We launch them in February. We run 4 or 5 months of cohorts, putting amazing family ministry leaders together, talking through what does it mean to be an effective family ministry leader. It's always great to learn in context. We're doing some new things this year. We've lowered the price. It includes the whole process includes full access to Ministry Boost. We've got some exciting additional voices that are joining us, so you don't want to miss it. So if you're a Kidmin leader, which you probably are because you're watching this, or hey, you got a student pastor that you work with and you think your student pastor needs to grow up a little bit, just kidding. Invite them. We have a lot of student pastors in our cohorts as well, or next gen pastors. So we're really excited about that. You can click on over to ministryboost.org and click on coaching, and we'd love to get you in a cohort. Nick, last episode we had a really spirited conversation about volunteers. I'm so glad we had the conversation. It was kind of a response from all the conversations I had, and I know you had some at CPC, all the different frequencies of schedules of
Hmm.
volunteers, serving. You got some people serve every week, but most everybody serves every other week, once a month, once every 6 weeks. We learn about one new schedule, 2 weeks on, 4 weeks off, whatever it may be. And let me recap the kind of the gist of what we want to talk about last week, and then Nick, I'm going to pass it to you because you gave us a challenge that I want to recap as well. But I said basically the recap, the big idea of the last episode's conversation was how you schedule your volunteers says a lot about your philosophy of ministry or your philosophy of discipleship. So if discipleship requires frequency, if building trust requires frequency, and our volunteers are not frequent, then is discipleship even happening in our ministries? So, Nick, comment on that, but then also you left us with a challenge at the end of last episode.
Well, I do think it's hard to say, is discipleship even happening? That's like really harsh because it's like, is it?
Yeah.
It is, but is it as good as it could be?
Yeah.
Surely not. It's like in the Bible, if there's like Jesus says, "Come and follow me," and they're like, "I'll follow you on Mondays. Let's see how that goes." Like you're gonna get something, but you're not gonna get everything that you could get from it. And so, yeah, at the end, we kind of left people hanging. It's like something I hate doing because I like to be very practical, which this podcast obviously is going to be real practical and even more practical going forward, talking about a topic. But we kind of left them with like no real solutions. Today we're going to talk some solutions, but the action item we left them with, if you're listening, was what is your current rotation of volunteers primarily, because you might have a mix. Why is it that way? And what's stopping you from changing it? Like
You're
we
right.
talked to that one church with a 2 on 4 off, where you have to do like, you have to get AI out to figure out when people serve and how many you need and all those things. Um, and the answer for them was clearly has always been this way since before they got there.
Yeah.
Leadership wants it that way, so to
Right.
change it would be very hard. And then people serve on different teams. Like it's a whole other culture, obviously.
Right.
So if you're listening, hopefully you thought through that or you're doing it right now, and you know the answer of what is your primary thing, why is it that way, and what's stopping it from changing.
And the real conversation we want to have is like there are some people with I want to call them immovable obstacles, which they're not immovable, but they feel like it because I probably couldn't get rid of Sunday school, and not that I'm saying that I would want to, but
Or I
those
can't
are
make my
things
church launch a second service in my
right.
role. Like I can't go to the pastor like, hey, we're launching a second service. I don't know if you know, but it's happening in
Let's get on
2 months.
So
yeah.
those are more the immovables. But we've met so many leaders who have 2 services every weekend or 3 services every weekend, and yet the majority of their volunteers still serve on a monthly basis or every other week basis, and we just think that's not right. Like that's not ideal. And especially, and I'm glad you brought clarity to that as well, because I was too harsh in saying that. Is discipleship happening? Discipleship can't happen that way, and that's not true. Because sometimes even the presence, like the presence of your ministry in a child's life, can be transformative, 100%. But we believe in the power of relationship, and when you can put a weekly dedicated small group leader in the life of 8 to 10 kids, 8 to 12 kids, like something really powerful happens in that moment with the weekly volunteers. So, so what's getting in the way? And so hopefully we're all in agreement. If I can increase the consistency of my volunteers, especially in the small group leader role, that's a win. Like that's a win. Then the ability for us to disciple kids in our ministry, it goes up. It goes up into the right exponentially. And so if I have control, if I have the ability to make changes, then what's stopping me? What's stopping you? So today, in today's episode, we want to kind of get into the nitty-gritty, some of the practical stuff, the stuff that we love. We apologize. I'm sorry. We left a cliffhanger in the last episode.
Just for a week.
Just for a week, and if you're catching this 6 months from now, you just finish listening
for 5
minutes ago.
You just roll right.
So
you're
fine.
Right in the next.
Okay,
yeah.
You made it. You didn't go home crying to your mom. But today we want to talk about. Okay, so what's next? Okay, I'm committed. Like I may not be able to change some things, but some things I can. And so I'm going to start doing what I can do. So, but I think we got 4 or 5 really great ideas that we want to share with you that can help. And we would even say like moving from every other week to weekly or once a month to weekly. But it might be a baby step if you're moving from monthly to every other weekly or month, whatever it may be. We want to share some of those. But what we want to start, let's start, Nick, with these, what I like to call immovable obstacles. Because what do you do if your church only has one service?
Get fired obstacles. The obstacles that could get you fired if you tried it too hard.
That's right. It's the sacred cows. You can't move that cheese. So let's start with that one, Nick. If you're at a church that only has one service and you're thinking, I can't get weekly volunteers here because that would mean somebody's not going to church. But I've sat in lots of workshops with you, Nick, where you've actually given some really great solutions of how you could actually move to weekly or as close to weekly as imaginable in that situation. So what would you say to somebody in that situation, Nick?
I do have an idea for that, but I got to go with this other thing first. Because my first choice, if you have one service, is to add a second service. And I know I say it like it's easy, but man, adding a second service does more to reach more people and grow your church and help people serve than almost anything else. Like there's this now, and I worked with a church, you know this, Kenny, where they only had one service and it was theological. Like they would not say that your church is sinful if you have more than one service. They wouldn't go that far, but they felt like the definition of ecclesia, the Greek word for church, it was like meant one gathering. Yeah. I would strongly disagree, but I understand their perspective. So there's some churches that are in that category, but that's not most churches. Most churches have one service just because of the numbers. You know, your church average is 120, the auditorium seats 250. We're fine. Your church averages,
church communicators, they don't want to preach to empty rooms. And I get it.
No, and that's a very real thing. Yeah, I believe in that. So that's where I'm with them. I would not, if I was a church of 120 with an auditorium that sat 300, I would not add a second service unless I completely changed the look of that auditorium so it didn't feel like 300. You know what I mean? That's a whole separate conversation we get into. But I know a lot of churches. My youth pastor became a pastor shortly after I graduated high school. And Kenny, he's still a mentor of mine. He lives right around here. His church is near me. For years, they had one service. It was they would seat like 210, anywhere from like 180 to 220 in 260 seats. And I was
Mm.
always on him. Like, why are you not launching a second service? Like, you would reach more
Yeah.
people. People would come more frequently. More people would start volunteering. And, sure enough, they did, but they didn't do it till they built a different building. And they actually had to, a whole thing moved in, whatever. And, of course, their church grew through that. So, like, Tim Keller has a great article about the church size dynamics. The late Tim Keller, it's a great article. Every church leader should read it. And in there, he says when you add more options, people opt. So I think if your one service is 3/4 full, even 2/3 full, you should already be thinking about the second service. And the easiest way to get there is this other idea that you're talking about, Kenny, which
Yeah, this is it.
one of the many church plants that we've helped start had this idea early on, and it's the idea of a volunteer service. So they had one service publicly at 10:30, and then they had a bunch of volunteers, like any church does. They were meeting in a movie theater. I want to say they were averaging like 120 to 150, something like that at the time. And they had a volunteer service that was not public. Only people that knew about it were the volunteers at 9 o'clock. And I preached there one time at their church, and I preached at this volunteer service. At most, there were 24 people in the crowd, when I preached that first service, because that's how many volunteers were there. And they'd have their kids in there too. And then they did the second service publicly at 10:30. Well, that grew. 24 volunteers became 30. Eventually it was 40. And once you're in the 40 range, you can start thinking about launching that as a public second service. But the great thing was their volunteers could go to that volunteer service. It was almost the exact same service. Sang the same songs. You preached the same message. The hosting was a little bit different. So like if I was the host, there could be a little more vision casting, because I know there's volunteers there.
It could be a volunteer huddle.
But I still pitched this. I still did some of the same hosting. Like if I was promoting the summer event, I would promote the summer event. You know what I mean? So, and you kind of pray together in a different way than you would pray in your service, right? Because, it's a bunch of volunteers. But other than that, it was the same thing. I mean, like for me, it was like, oh, I get one shot at preaching this before I have to preach it again.
That's right.
You know what I mean? So I love that idea. I just think there's so much vision in that. And you can even go a step further and recruit a couple childcare workers that watch kids during that service, so that
because then they can go to church during the next service.
Exactly. Yeah. And so you do this, I just think, and then you're headed towards that original idea, which is adding a second service. So in my mind, man, unless there's other extreme examples, I would certainly do one of these two. And if I'm starting from scratch, do the volunteer service to get it big enough to launch it as a second service.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great idea. And again, you probably don't have the decision-making ability and leverage to make that, but you could provide the idea. Because, most pastors, like they want their church to grow. They want to grow their church. This is a really intentional way to invest in your core and create the opportunity to maybe expand to a second service. And when you have two services, it's like what you can do with volunteers is exponential. Just getting to that second service. So that's a great idea. Okay, so for this immovable object, maybe there's an option there. Let's talk about the other one. Let's say you are at a church that does Sunday school or adult Bible fellowship or adult small groups, whatever they call it today at your church. Sometimes it's sneaky. What is it really? It's Sunday school. It's been around for hundreds of years.
Obviously, Jesus called it Sunday school when he went. So
he did as a little boy when he was going to Sunday school with his grandma. But you've got Sunday school, and the problem with this model, and again, it is a model, and models aren't necessarily all bad or good or whatever. The challenge with this model is that many of your best potential volunteers to lead small groups or whatnot now have to choose between, am I going to serve and invest in the next generation? Or am I going to find community for myself? Am I going to be in a place where I can be discipled? And that I just don't love that we basically put people in a place where they have to choose. And then at the end of the day, who feels the pain? It's the kids. And it's the children's ministry. And so I don't love that. And so what do you do in that situation? Because some churches might have like, a Sunday school hour and then a service. Or they might even, I remember I was at a church, my first full-time vocational church, we had 2 Sunday school hours during the service time. So you could go to Sunday school during either hour, and or you could go to the church, the main service during either hour. And the challenge that you find yourself in is, what are you going to do? How are you going to recruit volunteers when you're already strapped, for that? And Nick, I know you've got something you want to say. I had this conversation with someone just last week, and here's the hot take from Kenny, okay? Which you're always going to get these. Like at this place in my career of where I am, because I remember at that first church, we had Sunday school, we had Wednesday night, we had two services on Sunday morning, and I remember being inspired. I went to a CPC when I was there, and being inspired and recognizing like where are our kids being intentionally discipled by consistent volunteers, and I actually ended up creating a discipleship thing on Tuesday night. So I had two. Because I didn't feel like I could actually do it on Sundays because of the volunteer situation. And how broken is that? So like I've made a decision, like if I were to move again, which dear God, I hope I don't, but if I were to move again, I wouldn't choose a church. Now again, Holy Spirit directs me, God directs me, but I would not choose to go to a church with Sunday school because I want the best possible option to recruit weekly volunteers, and that would be a big obstacle for me. But what I'm not saying, this conversation I had with a couple of people last week at CPC, I would say, but you know what? You're where God put you, and if God hasn't released you, you do everything that you can to bring volunteers to become as consistent as possible and to find places to disciple kids, whatever it takes. And that might be your role. Like, I know it might be frustrating, it might be harder than it is, but maybe that's where God has put you for this time to help with that. But Nick, I know you've got something you wanted to add to that as well.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. I mean, I know we joke that you've been in 20 churches in your life, and I've only been in 2. I don't know if you've been in 20, but you've been in a lot because I'm moving and working in different jobs, over 10, right?
Well, I'm growing up. I mean, I've been in like 5 different churches growing up because my family moved.
Yeah, you were a military kid. So I've only been in 2. The one I grew up in attending, and then the one we helped start 20 years ago.
That's amazing. You're like unchurched people of like, I've only been in one church because I got saved last year.
Yeah, or people, I mean, some people that never work for a church, right? They just go to a church and that they always went to or whatever. And I am with you 20 years ago when Jennifer and I, my wife and I, we felt like God was calling us to help a church plant. Didn't think I was going to work on staff at one, but we thought we're going to volunteer. We're going to be like 15-hour-week volunteers, to help a church plant. And it took a year and a half before we landed where we did. And in hindsight, it's like, man, that's probably one of the biggest answered prayers of my life, is being part of this church. Because it was something we prayed for before we even knew it existed or where it was or whatever. But we had a list. It was very not like, it was almost like God help, direct us to where we can help a church plant, but we've got a criteria. Okay.
Yes, of course.
And, having grown up in a Baptist church that was congregationally led, and I could tell lots of funny stories, also painful stories about that. I had a list. I didn't want Sunday school. I wanted a small groups based church, not a church that had small groups, but a church that was founded on, based on small groups.
Yeah.
I wanted elder led, not congregationally led. I wanted certain style of music that, like, if I invited my friend who was not a part of any church, they would be like, I get this.
Yeah.
I wanted a church that would speak their language, not would assume they grew up in church or knew the Bible or even knew who anybody in the Bible was. So I had this whole list. So I'm with you that I agree. And there's different ways that I think you can approach it though. Like, and again, this is bigger. You're never doing this as a kids leader, but my pastor was a youth pastor at a church for 13 years before he planted our church. And it was a large church that had grown from 300 to 3,000 while he was there. They made the shift from Sunday school to small groups, starting in student ministry. What they did, this is back in the 1900s, Kenny. This is in the 90s. The church
those are good times.
Those were good times. The church just turned 200 years old 2 years ago. So, I mean, this church had Sunday school for a long time. Not from the beginning, I'm sure, but it was a long time. So anyway, they started small groups in 6th grade. And then the next year it was 6th and 7th. And the next year it was 6th, 7th, and 8th. And then they added high school in one chunk. So 4 years in, all of a sudden the student ministry is small groups based, not Sunday school based anymore. And then it was like some groups were started happening for adults and different nights, and they kind of eased it in. I don't love that because it was like an 8 to 10 year cycle. Probably took them 20 to actually kill all of the actual Sunday school classes. Yeah. But that's a method. But the other thing I think about is this. I'm not going to name this church, but I'm working with a large Baptist church that's multi-site. Sunday school is the core, is in all of the campuses, except some of the campuses that don't have a big enough building to have
Yes. It. Yeah.
So my point is, hey, and you're like, so you don't have Sunday school everywhere. You figure something else out, don't you? Yes, you do. And when I was there, visiting, they literally only have like 2 rooms that groups could even meet in on a Sunday. Like, that's how limited the space is. aside from the kids and obviously the sanctuary and all that.
So let me
And
guess, is a senior adult Sunday school class in those two
it
rooms?
actually wasn't. It wasn't,
No?
Kenny. The student ministry was in one, so it's almost like there was kind of like a student Sunday
Okay.
school class. Like they don't have a separate student thing a different night of the week. And then there was this group of parents meeting in
Ah,
probably the best room, a small room. Don't get me wrong. And I actually got to meet with them for a moment, and just we had nothing to do with this topic right here.
right.
But in the back of my head, I thought this is a shame
Mm.
because if I were one of the parents in this group, not a staff, I'm a parent in the group. Maybe I volunteer somewhere. We could 100% meet somewhere else. I would rather host this group at my house during
yeah.
the week. And I know it would be harder. It's easier to just do it on Sunday morning when you're
Right.
already there and
Right,
there's
right,
a place to put your kids, right? Like I get it. But if I'm mission minded, I would rather this group meet at my house or Starbucks or whatever, one night during the week or even after the service or whatever. And then all of us are serving in kids ministry instead
Yeah.
on Sunday. Now I'm biased. I love this. I think we should all be serving, right? Like, so, but I would have had that mindset as a volunteer before I ever worked on staff at a church. So I guess my point is like, yeah, you, especially as a kids ministry leader, can't can Sunday school. Your pastor will probably get fired if he tries to get rid of Sunday school. That's probably going to happen.
right.
But what you could do, which churches do, is, hey, these people want to serve in kids ministry, so they're not going to do Sunday school. They're going to have a group that meets on Tuesday night.
Right.
Most churches would allow that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where I know you can't have anything outside of Sunday school.
Yeah, we can have two things at once. We can have small groups and
Yeah.
Sunday school. And
Yep, and
that
you
might
just
be
keep, and you need the leaders you need the staff to be on board. Your pastor has to be on board. Your executive pastor, whoever it is, the leader of the small group is going to have to be on board, right? But again, if I were the leader of that group, and you came to me with this vision, I mean, how do I say no to that? What's the faith of the next generation worth? Is it worth
Everything.
me giving up my easy Sunday school class on Sunday morning in exchange for a harder group at night? It is worth it. It is worth it. And if you can convince me, maybe we can convince a couple other leaders.
That's
And
right.
before you know it, 5 Sunday school classes actually aren't happening Sunday morning. They're happening
Yeah.
throughout the week, and all of those people are serving.
I think that's a great idea, and that's a very hopeful idea. And you could be the one who brings that vision, casts that vision, has those meetings. And so, if you find yourself in either one of those two types of churches, then maybe God's called you there to be the voice of reason, the voice of change and movement. Because what Nick said, what's the faith of the next generation worth? So that's beautiful. Now, here's an idea. We're getting ready to get into the really practical stuff, even though what we just talked about was pretty practical. If you find yourself in those situations, if you find yourself in a situation where, man, it is what it is, and maybe the best we're going to be able to do is every other week volunteers. We might have some weekly volunteers because they're just crazy, but and we're not going to be able to stop them. But we got every other week volunteers. I actually think there's a way to approach every other week volunteers to make it almost as good as weekly volunteers. It's not as good, but it's almost as good. And part of that idea is, and you have to cast a lot of vision for these two volunteers, like, hey, you two together are one volunteer for this group of 7 or 8 kids. And one of you is going to be here one week, the other one's going to be here the other week, but you two need to own this together. So here's what I would say. If it's my week to serve in that room, then the other volunteer, they still come by before church. They come by, they high five all the kids, say, hey, I love you. Kenny's got it this week, but I'll be back next week. Or maybe they're coming at the end of the service and they're, high fiving, fist bumping, talking to parents. And so those kids are still like, okay, I do have a different leader each week, but I see him every week. I feel intimately connected to both of them. And then even if I wake up sick on a Sunday morning, I'm not calling the kids director. I'm calling my co-leader and saying like, I got a cold. Can you be there? What do we need to do to figure this out? Or, hey, I'm going to be gone for 3 weeks this summer in June. Can you cover for those 3 weeks and I'll take July? So it's recruiting every other week volunteers with a mission that we're going to lead this group together. You can find those volunteers. And again, it's the same thing as you're raising the bar, just like you would asking for weekly volunteers. We're just asking for more ownership from some every other week volunteers. Get rid of even if you only have one service a Sunday, get rid of the once a month. If somebody can only serve once a month, they're a sub. That's what they are. They're subs. Schedule them because you always need subs, but they're not one of your regular volunteers. Go every other week. You can do this, and then if you can, go every week. So, Nick, let's dive into some some really practical stuff of like, okay, so maybe I am at the church where I've got 2 services, but for whatever reason, most of our volunteers serve every other week or once a month or once every 6 weeks. What are some things, what are some ideas of things that I could do to begin moving people towards a higher rate of frequency in serving?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is you have to commit that that's going to be the new standard.
Mm,
Like, because the other thing is, I think a lot of leaders, you want to get there almost like, again, like the Sunday school thing and the groups, where it's like it's an option. Weekly is an option.
right.
Well, if weekly is an option along with every other week, guess who's never choosing weekly? Most
Right.
volunteers. Like, you'll get those
Right.
few super committed, great, you love them. But I mean, and then this is nothing against even high capacity people could gravitate towards the least committed option if it's an option because they're high
Yes.
committed. They have a lot of things going on.
Yeah.
So if you're like, hey, you can serve once a month, every other week, or weekly. Who's picking weekly? Like some people will, some percentage, 6% will pick weekly. And some people will pick every other week, even with a monthly there. But you'll have a lot of people that are going to pick the lowest thing. So you have to decide weekly's the new standard. All new volunteers are weekly in these roles. Not in every
Yes.
role, but in the roles, especially the roles leading directly with kids. If you can do that, like you said, if you have 2 services, if, Sunday school is not a competition or you have another solution for it. And then I think the other thing is, that's like 2 parts, right? The one part is all new people are weekly. They don't know any
Right.
better. That's the
Right.
new standard. But then now you're dealing with all your existing volunteers. And I think it's a lot of conversations with people. You get the people that are in, maybe they already serve weekly, or maybe you just know they're so committed, they'll do it. You have a meeting with them and you just talk about this change that you're moving to a weekly standard for these roles. And it's these people, they're the easy ones to talk to, right? They're like, yeah, I know we've been needing this.
Right.
I've been doing weekly for 5 years. Let's get everybody else on board, But you also need their support because it's almost like it's kind of, think about like you're the captain of a ship in the old days and, you're going to have a mutiny on your hands if 90% of the people on the ship aren't with you. So you need to start with the 10 or 20% or whatever that are with you and get them on board, and they're going to be a champion for this. If somebody caught them in the hallway a month from now, it's like, hey, have you heard that, Kenny's moving us to a weekly commitment? I don't like that. And what they're going to say is, oh, I think it's great. I think it's great because we need to give these kids our best. It's what I had growing up when I went to church, and I don't want these kids to have anything else. I know it's hard, but I love the idea. And it's not for everyone. That's one of the phrases you'll use a lot. Yeah. It's not for everyone.
Yeah, it may not be for you, but it may not be for what these kids need.
And what you're saying is, like, it's for people that really want to give part of their life for the next generation. It might not be for you, but it's for me.
I love that. I know when I got to Arizona, I was a kids pastor at a church there, and most of the volunteers served every other week. And I made that decision. I was going to make that move. And I used Calendly, and I had breakfast, lunch, and coffee dates. And I think I met with like 60 volunteers over the course of like 2 months. And it was like some weeks I was twice a day. I was having a coffee or having a lunch. Now, the great thing is I ate out for like 2 months. It was great. It was fantastic.
Going to say, I could get behind the idea of 2 lunches, 2 breakfasts. Like, that's right up my alley.
But it was great because it was an opportunity just to connect with the volunteer, get to know them a little bit better. Hey, what's been working for you? What's not been working? And then just say like, hey, there's this thing we're going to move towards. We're start casting the vision for what weekly does, why it matters, how it plays into discipleship. And then like, what do you think of that? Like, we're going to move to this like in 2 months. Would you be in for something like this? And you're going to find right then and there who's in and who's out. And what I found, and when you invest in them and have that, more people are in than they're out, generally. And again, that's just my experience. More people are in, they're out when you're having that one-on-one conversation. Now in the crowd, they're all like, "Give us Barabbas," whatever. But when you're with them face to face and you're unpacking the vision for it, they're in. And I would say, and this is the math. Okay, if you're into math, okay. If
you're not into math, you need to know the math.
You do need to know the math. If you have all your volunteers or every other week volunteers, half of them can quit because they think you're insane for going to weekly, and you're in the exact same place where you were. And the reality, I've done this multiple times, like 5 different times at 5 different churches. You never lose half. I mean, I would typically lose like 20%, maybe 30%. Now, Nick has a story of somebody who rolled this out, and what they all quit was they all
Dave,
said
yeah,
no,
this kids pastor I know named Dave. It's not normal circumstance, right? Because
no,
Dave came into this church. This was 20 years ago, and it was a church established Sunday school, different curriculum, class Sunday school class model of kids ministry as well, right? He changed everything in one fell swoop, which is
yeah,
probably not recommended. He changed the curriculum. He changed the strategy, from what I would call a Sunday school class model to like a large group, small group model, and the commitment from, every other week or whatever it was to weekly. He lost every single volunteer. And but here's the thing. He would say, I would have done it again in a heartbeat. We built
yeah,
up new in the new culture, the new model, the new strategy, got volunteers that fit that, and I would never turn back. It's so much better. I met him probably, I don't know, 8 years after he'd made that change. And so he'd seen the fruit from it for years, So,
yeah,
but I'm with you, man. Most people, you could even lose 40%. But again, you've grown the team. If you
right,
had 40 every other week volunteers, 20 are there each week, and 15 of them are like, I'm not doing this, but 25 of them say I am. You now have 25 volunteers there every week instead of
right.
20.
It's
Like you
better.
grew the team despite 40% of the people quitting. And I would take 20 weekly volunteers over 40 every other week every time. I would take
100%.
20 weekly volunteers over 80 once a month every time.
Oh
And it
yeah,
feels like a loss, doesn't it? Like, man, I lost 60 volunteers. No, no, no. I gained 20 high committed
yeah.
volunteers.
Yeah, and I would say this too. You said this earlier about like recruiting, like deciding from now on we only recruit weekly. This was 15 years ago, 17 years ago, when I made the decision, like, okay, from now on I'm only recruiting weekly. Now again, sometimes people come out like, hey, I'm a nurse. I was okay, yeah. Well, I'm not going to turn you away. Now we have different types of roles or whatever. But when we led with weekly, I remember the year before when we did this big volunteer push, like we got 50 people to fill out cards for every other week. And then this next year, I was nervous. I remember going on that Sunday. I was like, are we going to get like 5 or 10 or whatever like that? We got 50. We got the same number. Like we got the same number. And then all of a sudden I realized it's all in our head. It's all in our head. Like people are still going to say yes. And
Yeah.
so just do it. Okay, just do it. Okay, that's a great way. Here's another little strategy. Okay, because there is an option of like going all at it, draw a line in the sand. Hey, on January 1st, we're moving. Everyone's weekly. Those things. I've done that before, but I've also done it slowly as well. And here's what I would say: if you're starting to recruit people and they're saying yes to weekly, here's the trick: put them all in the same room together, or put them in the same together. Because what's going to happen is if 80% of your volunteers serve every other week, 20% of your volunteers serve weekly, and then you're recruiting new people, and all of a sudden they're in a room with where the majority of the people serve every other week. Promise you, in like 3 or 4 weeks, they're gonna say, "Hey, I'm thinking about going to the other schedule."
Yeah.
They will
There's
influence the
another
wrong.
schedule that you didn't tell me about?
Yeah, no. Now sometimes when I'm recruiting those volunteers, I will lay it out like, hey, a lot of our volunteers have been serving at every other week. It's less effective, and we're moving towards this. So I'll let them know so they understand why. But if I can start filling up rooms one at a time, where every volunteer in that room is weekly, they're going to build better relationships with the kids, with each other. They're going to be totally jazzed, and you can just keep moving your every other week volunteers out as you build these new rooms, and you can do it one room at a time. And over the course of like 3 or 4 months, all your volunteers now are weekly, and they never lost the desire for that. So that's the strategy. Sometimes I'll tackle a service at a time, or I'll say, okay, we're going to start this move to weekly, and we're going to start in preteen at our 11:15 service, and we're gonna fill that up first. Then we'll move to the 9:30 service. We'll fill that up. Now we're going to move to elementary. So don't be afraid to work in segments. Sometimes that's the way to do it if you're going to do it over the course of some time. Nick, what's another really practical strategy of moving your volunteers to serving more frequently?
I think a big part of it is, and this goes along with what you just said, because you talked about one room at a time, and then
Mm-hmm.
2 rooms, and then they're going to have more of an impact. More, I think you got to tell better stories that celebrate the win of why you're there every week. Like, like when I left church on Sunday, my 2 daughters both have had the same small group leader at our church in elementary, and so Tammy has been the small group leader for our older daughter, and now she's a smaller group leader for our younger daughter, Paige. And Tammy knows everything about our family, because she's had my girls, in there with a gap in between, of course. But She knows my dog's name. He's sitting right here on the floor. She knows everything that's going on with him at any point. She knows where we're going on vacation and how was it. Because my girls talk to her because she knows them.
Mm-hmm.
She's there every week. And so I think you find ways to tell stories that celebrate the volunteers who are there weekly, and especially the things that they probably know or do, or you know what I mean, the connection, the wins they have. That could you have an every other week volunteer that knows my daughter's pet's name? Like, sure, but like they're not probably as likely to be as connected. So like, what are those stories that celebrate that? And you find, and it's not like, hey, I'm telling this story about Shannon. She's here every week. Like, I'm not saying that like to really rub it in your face. But eventually what happens is people just pick up on, yeah, I should do that. Yeah, I should email the parents of the kids in my group. Yeah, I actually don't even know the name of the kids in my group's pets and, like what's going on, like, or whatever it is. And so I think the more you could tell stories of where it's working, celebrate those wins. What does Andy Stanley say? What's celebrated is repeated, or what's rewarded is repeated.
Yeah.
Well, the celebration is a reward, and then it gets repeated in other volunteers. Because, the best some volunteers are going to look at it like, I can't do that. And that's okay. They're going to self-select out. But the best volunteers are going to be like, I could do that. I want that. I want to be that kind of volunteer to the kids in my group.
Right. I think that's great. Yeah, I think vision, having a compelling vision, talking about it. I do that all the time. I always, when I'm doing pre-service huddles or volunteer orientations, I always talk about, I use the word weekly all the time. That when I'm so impressed by our volunteers who show up week after week after week. They're writing new stories with their kids every week, and so it's just terminology that we use all the time. Now, one of my favorite books of ministry is this book, Lead Small, and it is. I have purchased so many copies of this book. It says 150,000 copies sold. I think I bought maybe 50,000 of those 150,000. I put them in the hands of every one of my volunteers, every one of my small group leaders, because even in the first section of this book, it talks about being present and how does that play out? So when you show up predictably. And so I loved, this paints such a beautiful picture of what a great small group leader looks like. And those small group leaders are predictable leaders who show up predictably in the lives of their kids. So casting vision in those ways is a really big way. Okay, so man, we took a little extra time. This is a little bit of a longer one, but some good things. So hopefully, and there's so much more that we could talk about, and we probably will in the future. But hopefully, these are some ideas to help you take steps towards you can recruit weekly volunteers. Raise the bar. You're looking for better volunteers. And I'll say this one last thing. What happens to the person who says, I can't do weekly? Does that mean they got to go serve in, janitor ministry or whatever like that? No. Like, there's still opportunities even in kids. They might be able to play a role in a flex role as a sub where they serve once a month, or we might move into guest services where that's a rotation team that serves every other week. So you can still make room for people. It doesn't mean they're banished from Kidmin. Not every, in my ministry, probably 80 to 85% of my volunteers serve weekly. The other ones are in roles that don't require weekly, or they're subs. So there's room. Like it's not binary. You can or you can't.
I just had this conversation with my wife, actually, because her and my son both serve in our kids ministry. She serves in the nursery. He serves in like the 3-year-old room. And the problem is my son is always playing soccer and lacrosse, and it's these sports that, the soccer's a club team. They play on Sundays a lot. And so it's pretty, now our church has 3 services. So what's great is it's pretty rare that my son doesn't come to a service. He's a middle schooler, so he's not, we don't have student programming during the services. So he's in the service with us. And what's great is with 3 services, there's lots of options. If he has, a 9:00 game, an 11:00 game, he can still come to the service, but it messes with the rotation of serving. Right. And right. I was just telling my wife recently, I was like, I think you should go back to doing large group in elementary, like she used to do when we started the church and for years, because in our world, I think you might do this. I don't remember. Our large group volunteers serve once every 4 weeks because they do it for all 3 services. They memorize that one script and then do it 3 times. And so it's kind of like, and I was telling my wife, like, her hit rate of serving is not great now with his schedule and with the rotation, that she's on, versus if she went to this monthly thing, it would be a lot more flexible. Because she can absolutely do one Sunday a month. She could even usually do two. But what happens is like it changes and it doesn't fit a nice pattern.
Right.
So anyway, she's thinking about that. Obviously, I think rolling into the nursery a lot easier than prepping for, being on stage. So that's the part she's got to think about. But, to me, it makes all the sense in the world, because like you can be real consistent here and it's one time a month, because you can't do every other week. And we need both. Frankly, we need more of the large group elementary than we do in our church, than we do these weekly roles with leading kids directly. So,
yeah. Okay. That's great. Well, remember, increased frequency, increased consistency equals more opportunities for discipleship, more opportunities for life change. So where you can, let's move our volunteers towards a higher level of frequency and commitment, and they'll respond. They'll do it. It's a lot of work, but the fruit is beautiful. Like, you will be more excited than you've ever been doing the job that you do. So hopefully this was inspiring and maybe gives you a little bit of hope. Listen, we love to talk about this. We're going to continue to talk about volunteers here on this podcast. It's kind of what we do and what we're passionate about. We got some more ideas in the coming weeks. But if you have questions, don't hesitate to email us. You can email me, Kenny, or Nick at kidman.com. We'd love to dive into the conversation with you. Well, thanks again for being with us. We'll be back again next time with another amazing episode. Thanks so much for being with us today.